The policy to increase the minimum capital a bank can now have saved with the Bank of Uganda is under consideration. This suggestion seeks to raise the current requirement by up to 500% from 25 billion to 150 billion shillings for commercial banks. And if the banks of Uganda were to take some action today, about 10 banks will be in trouble.
When you look at the numbers, out of about 24 banks that are in this country, a good number of them, at least more than 10, are undercapitalized at the moment.
Swinging into action after a decade of watching from a distance could be a telltale sign of a shift in turn of events or an attempt to take care of potentially brewing situation before it explodes, partly explaining why the central bank has maintained the COVID-19 liquidity assistance program for the banks.
That regulators have to be a little bit more cautious and have a keen look at capital buffers as far as financial institutions are concerned. So from that background, and when you bring it up to today, and you see how economies have gone down on their knees because of the pandemic, so shocks are not a new thing. It's a new normal. So in order to respond to shocks and ensure that there is financial stability, really banks have to remain solvent and by extension have financial stability in the entire system.
So, while there might be some fear that local banks may be locked out due to this high capitalization requirement, apparently the survival of the sector in the face of the future shocks seems to be the more overriding factor.
Now, what would be the pros and cons to this? Well, there's a school of thought that suggests that when you increase capital, market players have a tendency of passing on extra cost to customers. And secondly, that it impairs competitiveness in the sector. Those are valid arguments. However, one has to sort of right-size that argument in the context of the structure of the financial system that we have.
Smaller banks may be swallowed up by the bigger ones, usually referred to as consolidation, as it has happened in Nigeria in the early 2000s. We will have to see what happens, even while some quarters argue that the 25 banks in such a small economy is crowded for such a small space. Ismail Musa, Ladu, NTV Business.